Well, the warmest of greetings to you, one and all. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Christian Whistleblower channel. And thanks to Anthony C. right off the bat, a $20 super chat. Thank you, sir. Very, very nice to hear from you. And I understand you brought one of the great subscribers into our midst. So thank you for that, Anthony C. And special thanks as well to Natalie. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment that you've all been waiting for. A man that needs no introduction anywhere in the refined and civilized world. He goes all the way back to 1970s radio, ladies and gentlemen. He's the man, the myth, the legend, and still somehow yet a way of life. Let me introduce to you, folks, the new co-host of The Last Stand, my friend, and I have a feeling future and now current mentor, Mr. Robert Bauer, the professor, with his hot chocolate, no doubt, in his Bugs mug.
You can't do it all without the chocolate in the mug.
You got to have it.
Jeff, thank you for that. I'd say extremely well-written, well-read introduction.
Yeah, I spent all night writing it.
Well, I could tell it was heartfelt and it was right. It hit home with most of the points. I got to tell you, being able to have conversations and contribute to those conversations is just a fascinating shitload of fun.
It really is. It really is. There's no doubt about it.
And when you get to do with interesting people on interesting subjects, you have interesting conversations.
Absolutely.
That's where all the fun is for me.
Did you really do 1970s LA radio?
I probably made some sound effects or some noise in the background of somebody's stuff at some point. I went to Downey High School, which is where a few musicians of note have come from. Richard and Karen Carpenter. They were a few years before me, I think 4 or 5 years.
Robert, I just heard her singing the other day on Sirius, and you forget how beautiful Karen Carpenter's voice was. It was just, I get goosebumps just thinking about how beautifully she sang, and what just a tragic story they ended up being, but how privileged we were to get to hear her for the years we did.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. And her story, she wrote with her brother Richard. And it wasn't until later on that the discovery of how actually pure her voice was. They had already reached some level of success, but the record labels just went, now, wait a minute, this woman's voice is just outstanding. Because they kept trying to find different people to sing the songs, right? And do the lead on it. We, in our youth and foolishness, fueled by too much freedom, testosterone, and RC Cola, we were listening to Black Sabbath and Zeppelin and and all the classic stuff back then. And we'd get a little hyped up and we'd get in our Mustangs and our Camaros and we'd go drive by Richard and Karen's house. We'd roll the windows down and hang out the window and go, Grand Funk rules.
That's horrible.
It was terrible. It was terrible. We were fools. We were foolish. But we were kids and we went, that's where we're at. That's what's going on. So, but when you think about some of that amazing music and stuff back then, school I went to, we had a great music program. James Hetfield, the guitar player from Metallica, was, I think, 4 or 5 years after me. So I was right between James and Richard and Karen. But it was a fascinating time. It was one of the most amazing things, and I've been asked this for, I don't know, maybe there's some wave of nostalgia woofing through the culture, but I get a lot of questions about, if you were going to grow up somewhere, what time and what place would you think would be the most ideal? And I think about my childhood in the 60s and 70s in Southern California. It was like, I can't think of anything that would have been more awesome.
Robert Stanley said the same thing the other night when he was on this show, and he said it really was paradisical. It was like a dream. It was Nirvana. It was Camelot. It was all that, and a nice cold beer.
We had, and the beer was cheap. I mean, I grew up on Coors and Olympia and Hams, and I don't know if anybody remembers
The good stuff.
I mean,
the good stuff.
That stuff was the shit. But so we grew up on that. We had, it was Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. Okay. Soupy Sales, Dean
Wow.
Martin. Okay. Jack Benny, Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson said to me, he's kind of like, I had this sense that if I was in America, I was from someplace else, and somebody just dropped me in America, and I had to look around and figure out what the hell was going on. If I saw Johnny Carson, I would probably feel okay and informed, and I would get to laugh because he was awesome.
Yeah, Johnny really, not only did he, I guess you could argue he pioneered the modern rendition of that genre anyway, and there really hasn't been anyone like him since then.
No, and that's the thing. We were talking to Rocky and I were talking the other day. He was asking me about talent, and he says, well, like your casting couch back there. And I said, well, it's a talent couch. And actually I refer to it as a workbench. And so we got to talking about talent. And I said, from my perspective, at least in my observation, as I gander across the gaze of shit that's going on out there, I'm finding that talent's, it's getting harder to find.
Oh, yeah.
There's not as much of it. And it's not that there's not as much of it, which is a problem. It's that the what's out there, there's more of it, and it's just not good. It's just not quality. And I look at the old stuff, it's still being some of the best quality out there.
Yeah. Yeah. My classic example is, Freddie Mercury writes Bohemian Rhapsody, I mean, in 21 hours or something like that, all by himself. Maybe arguably the greatest song ever written. Beyonce put a ring on it, has like 17 writers, and they took 6 months.
Yeah, exactly. And when you realize and you think about how the stuff that people look at and give value to, I mean, because at the end of the day, whatever you're doing, if you're consuming something, you are giving your time and your energy to it, right?
Absolutely.
And therefore, what you consume or what you put your time and energy into in consuming is going to have some obvious impact in some way on who you is.
Yep.
So if you're consuming a particular focus and diet of agitated, angry, disharmonious energy and patterns, which come in the form of words and visuals and sounds and so forth, and you end up being affected by that stuff. So any one of them can be individually effective. Collectively, they can be basically a shitstorm, cramming a bunch of everything down a shit chute.
Yeah. So why is this fear porn so popular on YouTube? That probably arguably, at least within our side of the genre, the oh my God, horrible things are happening. It's the last days. We're never going to make it out. Why is that the thing that gets the clicks and gets the subscribers and gets all the view time?
Well, in my opinion, it's because of human nature. I mean, if you're familiar with Edward Bernays, right? I think you may have talked to Rocky about that, and I know we've talked about it. So Bernays, he was the nephew of Freud, and he took the exact opposite approach to the Freud's model. He looked at it and said, Freud wanted to harness the human animal, the passion,
right?
That depth of that makes you want to do shit. And that's the thing. That's an adrenaline rush. When that happens, you want, you feed off it. So I think that this fear porn is just the weaponization of the emotional state of taking arguably, from my perspective at least, when I look at the content and the way that this stuff is packaged, it's basically like somebody's going through the forest and they find a pile of scat. Like, look at that. Okay, we'll tell you what, we'll wrap this up in some nice little pretty paper and put a bow on it. We're going to toss it over here. These people are going to think it's candy. It's really, it's a turd. It's a turd.
It is.
A lot of times they don't even bother with a wrapper.
I agree so much. And it's really too bad, but I think it's very, very refreshing when people, like you come into this craziness. Cause I mean, you're not really a born and bred kind of conspiracy theory type guy are. I mean, you've invented stuff, you've gone over the world and all around the world and sold the stuff you invented. You know all about recording, you know all about production. And I mean, you come at it from a very different perspective. I think a much more objective, a much more empirical, rational, reasonable perspective. And I'm not saying you don't have passion, but I think you're able to come at things dispassionately, which is a increasingly rare quality.
Yes, I would concur with that, and only from the perspective that there's a difference between having emotion. Passion is an emotion.
Mm.
The cacophony of stuff that you can throw into the emotional construct and energy is, hell, they're not only, things like love and hate and anger and, very specific ones that manifest themselves, but there's a blend of all that shit too, depending on who you are. Your own individual vibration, your own resonance is going to determine to a large degree what you not only resonate with, but what you how you do that both voluntarily and involuntarily.
Good point.
Right? Because those are two simultaneous things that happen. And if you're aware of them, then you can at least pay attention to them. And at least in my experience, and this is the whole idea of doing this series with Rocky on Informatica. And the idea is to just say, look, before you have any visceral or emotional reaction to anything, do your best to break it down to its fundamentals so you can see what's causing that reaction.
Oh,
because that's where I think the weaponization has been so very, very well done, very craftfully done in the social discourse. Now, it doesn't hurt that you have a considerable amount of the unwilling recipients of your propaganda being just dumbed down themselves or not caring. It makes it a lot easier to get it out and, propagate it, disseminate it, and try to make it popular. But Rocky and Scotty and I were talking about this earlier, and the idea is that if it wasn't consumed, there would be less of it.
Ooh, exactly. Great point. Great point. And that's exactly right. And it's got to the point where now I'm thinking of a news story I read today. And of course, we'll talk a little bit about this. President Trump, we can talk a little bit about Trump. I try to be dispassionate with President Trump, and I think I'm fairly successful with it. I met the guy, I like the guy, but there's some things about him that I'm not real thrilled about, but I try to be dispassionate about him. And when I read today a headline on CNN.com that says, President Trump is dangerous because he won't listen to his advisors on Iran. And his advisors are all saying, bomb the shit out of him, right? And Trump is saying, I mean, they shot down a drone, arguably. They shouldn't have done it. It was a bad thing. But, they're talking about, responding to that. They told, well, Mr. President, 170, 180, 200 people will die. And Donald Trump says, I'm sorry, but 200 human lives aren't worth a drone. And how can Donald Trump be dangerous when disagreeing with his advisors means people don't die? If he agreed with his advisors, people do die. And, if you say, well, they're just Iranians, don't think that Americans wouldn't die in a conflict either. And shame on you if you think, oh, it's just Iranians.
Well, I think there's a couple things going on here, in my opinion. First of all, I think that there's basically some, bunch of 3D, maybe even 4D chess going on here.
Interesting.
There's too many things that when you look at them individually and then collectively, there's some missing data. It's not quite clear. There's it seems like Trump's throwing the boys over there in the turbans, some lifelines. You're getting them an off ramp. And
he said, let's make Iran great again.
Dude, I tell you what, here is one of the things, going back to the point we were just talking about, that I think is quite fascinating. If you look at the people who are not happy, they make a lot of noise, and there's not as many of them as you think. They're just the noisy ones. There's anecdotal, insidious nonsense. Stone, you're going to have to wait, buddy. I'm on the air. They're taking these situations and saying, okay, we're going to make a lot of noise about it. because we make a lot of noise, it seems like there's more of us. It's that old tribal thing, get out there. And we're going to use things that are specifically very difficult to quantify outside of the empathetic, emotive connection that people correctly and admirably feel, sensitive and important to. But okay, so got it. Appreciate that. Now, what's the plan? Well, how are we going to fix this? And by the way, while you're thinking about it, if you haven't already, because I have a little bit, and I'd like to get some data on this, but if you have any thoughts about how we got here in the first place, and you're including that in whatever your remedies and remediation is for correcting this microcosm of this little space that you're going to, complain about, that's isolated and anecdotal and third removed, if it was more of what you are trying to promote it to be, I think a reasonable person would look at it and say, well, wouldn't there be a lot more of it than what we're seeing?
Yeah.
It doesn't. And aside from just the false narrative, and the intellectual dishonesty of trying to equate these different terms only for the sole purpose of to weaponize them.
Yeah.
I mean,
it really is sad. It really is sad.
So I look at it and I just go, okay, I see it. I see what goes on, and it comes at, regular times of the day, and volumes and velocity vary depending on your mileage, but it's all in this narrow fear, doom, gloom, pessimistic, agitated, noisy spot. There's not a lot of happiness going on in that thought process or ideology. There's just a lot of bullshit and spewage going on. So,
and what's really interesting on that, Robert, is that is the cacophonous noise we hear: gloom, doom, bad, it's horrible, it's fallen apart, it's never been worse. And yet when I watched, and I didn't plan to watch this, it somehow wound up on a TV out here in my house, President Trump's big thing in Orlando, where he was announcing his candidacy for 2020, his reelection. And I found myself, even though I was trying to be dispassionate, I found myself literally with tears coming down my face, not so much just because of what President Trump was saying, but the atmosphere in that room was positive. It was hopeful. It was optimistic. It was, it's going to be a great future. It can be different. And that is, in this world that we live in, I find that so compelling and so powerful. And I mean, it was literally palpable coming through the television. 20,000 people inside, 75,000 people outside, and it's hope. It's positive. And yet it's demonized. Have we really got to the place as a society, or even as a truth or quote unquote genre, where we demonize optimism and positivity and hope?
Well, this here's something that we could probably take a little look at. One of the little thought runs with a nugget in the noggin here. Think about this way: when you have a group of people that you want to control, that you want to provide, you want to persuade to do certain things in certain ways, you want to give them parameters and boundaries and all those good things, right?
Right.
Well, and that's the way that people need guidance. There needs to be some kind of frame of reference for things, so people can be productive, they can get along, there's harmony, as much harmony as possible. When you think about it, systems at the end of the day are all about, you want to have everything harmonized. Anything that's harmonized is going to be in a much better state than it was if it wasn't harmonized.
Right.
Wow, how
balanced.
Yeah, how profound is that, right? So
isn't it terrible when simplicities have become profundities?
Oh man, I tell you. And that's where I think we're kind of we're maybe in this cycle where there's some of this going on. And I think catching the wave, or, if it is coming in, it's like kind of looking out over the ocean, you see these waves coming in and you go, there's some good energy coming in out there. I want to try to get some of that. I want to get on that bad boy and ride it. Take advantage of it, because that's what happens in everything that is. Everything in the cosmos, everything in the consciousness has I was going to see, this is where I was going to go. And you probably want to just pull this one back after I let it out, but you decide. if you think about the good and the evil, the dark and the light within all things, all the materium, all the mysterium, all of the esoteric, the exoteric, and the internal teric that goes on instantaneously within your own head,
Mm-hmm.
your own mind, right? There's always this one side and the other. There's always a black and there's white. You can't have darkness, you can't have without the absence of light, right?
Right.
And when you think about light, light is something that you appreciate, but what you really get out of light is what is the clarity that you get by being able to see.
So
Right.
we need both, is what you're alluding to, huh?
Well, there seems to be some kind of symbiotic relationship. I don't know.
Oh, there really is. So are you saying to me, Professor, that we really can't have it all good? It wouldn't be good for us to have it all good?
Well, it seems like it would be more difficult to kind of sort it out and, and figure out what you want to put your face in and what you don't want to put your face in,
Yeah. That reminds me of the Matrix movie where they've got Morpheus strapped, chained to this chair, and what's his name? Agent Smith is talking to him about the Matrix. And he's like, the first one we made, it was nice, it was calm, it was enjoyable, but you kept rejecting it because there was something about humans that are like, we gotta have. They were looking for that balance. It was all yang and no yang, or all yang and no yin, whatever you want to say. So, as much as we hate to, even me, the last of the great optimists, I'm forced to admit that you can't have all optimism all the time. You can't have all. It's like, you can't just have ice cream and sundaes, right? You got to have some peas and carrots too.
Well, that's the thing, is that balance is something that is inherent.
Natalie says you're right, Professor.
Thank you, Natalie. It's an inherent need, and systems will balance themselves naturally. I think that's an inherent aspect of just the materium that we're in. It's the expression of the habit, like Rupert Sheldrake's model of morphogenic resonance, I think makes a lot of sense.
You're going to have to explain morphogenic resonance.
So Rupert Sheldrake is a microbiologist. He wrote his first book on this back in the 70s and hung out with Terence McKenna, Ralph Abrams, the trilogies out of the Echelon Institute. If you haven't seen them, find them, strap yourself in, and go for the ride.
Yeah, this is some deep, good stuff.
Oh, it's serious, deep, good stuff. But the Sheldrake came up with this theory. He kind of molded different concepts together and called it morphogenic resonance. And in essence, what it means is that the nature of the materium has its nature because of the materium that it's in. So in other words, it expresses itself knowing its construct, its vibrational energy and expression within the materium, but that's all it knows. Dr. Dean Radin would call that little c, or little consciousness. So it's conscious of itself and its task, but it's not conscious of its awareness or its surroundings.
Okay? Right.
It's conscious of being and producing what it innately has in its makeup and its signature to produce.
So sometimes in the workaday world where we got to pay the bills and all of this, are we in the little C world just trying to keep the hamster wheel turning?
Well, I think that's one of the masteries and wonders, I think, of being a carbon-based unit inhabited with some cosmic conscious energy, is that you're sitting there, you're in the middle of all this, you're trying to figure this thing out as it's happening in real time. And that's like, you want reality TV? How about reality me? I'm just sitting there going, what is going on here? And I think more people, it's easy to get caught up, to go back to your point about, we were talking earlier about this, weaponization, and why is the fear porn and doom thing? Well, that's a great emotion that you can use real cheap, real easy. It's easy to make, it's easy to fake, and you can put that shit out there all you want all day long and just get as many people as infected as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, no, yeah. So the consumption, if you stop consuming it, there'll be less of it.
Wow, that's so true. And is it easier energetically, consciously? Is it easier to be scared, worried, pissed off than it is to be, like Robert Stanley would say, calm, kind, courageous, and caring?
In my experience, I would say yes. However, with the caveat that once you get to the point to where you can ignore it, it's much easier.
It is. It is.
So from that perspective, yeah. I mean, let's see. Since I'm sure probably most of your listeners tonight are going, who is this dude? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I would make a joke, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, well, and I could, yeah. So anyway, moving on to, your whole theme, your approach and your background with the Christian whistleblowing thing is quite fascinating to me, because I too had a ministry back in the 80 through 82.
I did not know that.
And it was sanctioned by the church. It was a music ministry. I had studied the Bible.
It just reminds me, because all preachers want to sing and all singers want to preach, and they probably shouldn't, most of them.
I'd say you're probably right there. That there's some really bad stuff, but I tell you what, when the Spirit's moving,
everybody thinks they're Jimmy Swaggart, and in their own head they are, but they're really not.
Yeah, and when you think about it, I think Carlin was right. That the best thing to come out of the churches was the music.
Oh, that's true.
I can remember going up when I was growing up. We were Methodist light. It was obligatory.
Stucci says he wanted to be a preacher. That was my reaction too.
Yeah, right.
But you were a music minister. That's great.
Yeah, I had a band.
Calvary Chapel.
No, it was Community Chapel. Calvary had just come up, and it had just gotten started, and so did our church. My experience, the conscious experiential connection with what I was told was this happened this way. New Year's Eve, 1980, Colorado Boulevard, the next day of the New Year's Day parade, right? Thousands of people. I mean, this is 1980. I mean, hundreds, it's probably a few thousand, nothing like it is now. And I am, probably close to a 6-pack of Colt 45.
Oh my God.
Colt
45.
Half a bag of weed. I'm sure there was some mescaline in there somewhere. And it was like 2 a.m, and I was walking down Colorado Boulevard, and I had a joint in my hand.
At least you were still walking.
I was vertical and I was moving forward. It was quite something to behold.
You had your momentum.
So as I was walking the street, I'm kind of pay attention so I don't run into too many people, bounce off of them or they're bouncing off of me. And I see this little Filipino woman standing there trying to witness to people.
No kidding. That's awesome.
So she's standing there and everybody's, blowing her off, going by. They don't want to pay any attention. And I felt sorry for her. And so I walked up and I put the joint behind my hand and my back. And I said, "You can pray for me." And she put her hand on my chest and she prayed, and I'm feeling it. I'm listening to her. And then all of a sudden I felt the cherry on my fingertips on the road starting to burn. I'm going, okay, hurry up, please. I don't want to lose this joint. So she finishes praying. I opened my eyes and looked at her, and I was stone cold sober.
No way.
Yes. So I went, wow. Who are you? Where did you come from? And can I go where you came from? So turned out to be a Pentecostal church. No, Stone, you're just going to have to wait, buddy. You're just going to have to wait. So go to the church. I get baptized.
That night?
No, it was about a month later.
Okay.
But I went to the church, female pastor, community, community church.
Was she an attractive female pastor, Robert?
She was like an old black-white lady.
Okay, well that's fine. That's
So
fine.
she had the whole
If they're
soul.
not going to be hot, they need to be that. If they're going to be a
Yeah,
woman
and a lot of charisma. I mean, just great, great person, great woman. Anyway, so I got into the church. There was a couple of other people there. We formed this little band called Living Water.
Oh,
So
nice. Of
we
course, that was the name.
we did acoustic shows, and then the next thing we knew, we became like I think at top we were 9-piece band, and there was no 7-piece, and there was five writers,
Mhm.
and so we were.
Robert, if you waited a few years, you could have Rachel Farris as your lead singer, who's in our chat room tonight.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, we could probably put something together and do it online at least. Anyway, so we did youth authorities, prisons, rest homes, concerts, and it was an absolutely awesome time. Well, to get out of this story and on to something more interesting, my ministry lasted. I had Bible study 5-6 nights a week. It was focused on prophecy.
Wow.
Isaiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Revelation, all of them.
All the good stuff.
And even the esoteric stuff. And you got to remember, so this is back late 70s, early 80s. The local, well, not necessarily the local areas, but they were always on the public stations, the preachers. There were so many shows with these guys doing these prophecy shows.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
still are.
Are they still out there?
Look around YouTube, brother.
Oh, man. I'm missing out on the good stuff, I guess.
Oh, yeah. You could be cashing in. You're in the wrong place.
So I was seeing all that, but I had the Bible study. It was totally into prophecy, chewed it up. You know, if I do something that's not a head first or feet first, I do a jackknife and I get in there and just, want to rip it out and have some.
So, Robert, did you guys play the whole, what was that movie, Thief in the Night, and then do a concert and stuff, get everybody saved?
Yeah, and actually we would do prayer weekends. We would do the whole it was crazy. So the more I got into it, the more I learned that I didn't have answers to that I felt satiated with. The answers they became less substantive, more fluid and faith-based, of things that had to be looked at as, you just have to accept this. And I was like, yeah, but I'm still trying to have a connection with it. I'm trying to resonate. And even if I didn't understand if I don't understand something, for example, I don't understand the cosmos, but I resonate with it. Right. I feel good about it. I've got a sense about it. Nobody's explaining it yet in a way that I experience it, but that's what I found with my Christian spiritual journey and trying to figure out what that was for me. So I did the laying on of hands, speaking in tongues, casting out devils, did all that stuff, saw it, been there. Yeah, there's some stuff going on. Not sure the explanation I've been given is the correct one. I'm still open to research and trying to understand that.
What name did you use in casting out devils?
Oh, geez.
Did you use Jesus or did you use Yeshua? What'd you use?
No, it was mostly Jesus, Heavenly Father, Great Spirit.
Oh, really? So you went for the Native American genre there too?
Well, I see. I'm now a Taoist, right? And
that's right. I remember that. Now you're talking about that.
I became a Taoist back in the mid '90s.
So now you're into the Tao.
I'm into the Tao.
Wow.
The Tao is the wow. At least it is for me.
There's billboards for the Taoist movement right there. Tao is the wow. Join now.
The wow and the Tao.
But the Tao doesn't really want to be evangelical, right?
The Tao doesn't want to be anything other than the Tao, and even that is just saying that it is what it is. It goes back to the morphogenic resonance thing that I was talking about earlier. I think that there is an inherent nature in the expression of the consciousness of the cosmos. And I think that astronomy and astrology are the cosmological language, or at least a symbolic language, that can help us interpret the cosmos and the consciousness that makes it the cosmos. So that's just as fundamental as I can, express it. But that, to me, if there is an interconnectedness of the expression of all the energies, then to me, this gives all kinds of different potential answers and at least ways to explore. You know, that you were talking today about, you know, being able to, can we control God? It's like, well, it
No, can
depends.
we fire him? Can we say,
Yeah,
you're fired?
yeah. Well, I guess that depends on which invisible God you're dealing with,
It does, doesn't it?
right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, pick one. And apparently there seems to be some kind of, well, at least there's a track record from what we know, or at least what we've been given to know about how these various belief systems and gods have fared over time, you know, and how they actually were able to do whatever it was that they did and either get away with it, be good about it, or get their ass kicked over it.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you know, just about there isn't any surviving author of any belief system that's around to defend their shit.
There really isn't, is there? Huh.
Not that I've been able to find.
That's interesting. So without, going too deeply into it, because I don't really know myself, I think other people are probably wondering what is the basic tenets of Taoism?
Well, Taoism, the way that I interpret it, is that it's like it says in the I Ching and the Tao Te Ching, to anything describing the Tao is not the Tao.
Oh,
you can't describe it. It just is.
Wow. Well, then how do you know that you are a Taoist if you don't know what a Taoist is?
Well, it's not.
Well, you're on the right track then.
Well, see, yeah, there's that vibrative, there's a resonant groove that you just kind of slide into and you go, okay, now I feel this. This is something that, I resonate with, so it doesn't require any explanation.
I hate to interrupt, Robert, but this is too good to let it go by.
Uh-oh.
Rachel Farris says, I want to be like Belle sliding on a ladder going through the books in Robert's library.
Oh, my goodness.
We should arrange that because Rachel's an attractive woman. That would be fun to see her sliding on a ladder there in the background. It might take away from people's attention on you, Robert. Nothing personal, but.
Hey, I'd gladly step aside for that.
Absolutely. We could sell tickets. Stucci'd be like, oh, yeah, I want to see that.
I want some of that action.
How's God doing, Robert? How would you say the God of this world, the God that you used to preach about, how's he doing? How's his gig going in 2019?
I'm a casual observer, and sometimes I go put my face in it just to get a little bit more on my observer, because there's always more than, at least in my experience, there's always more than what you first see. And sometimes you gotta, when you put your face into something, you might have to hold your nose. You're definitely going to keep your mouth shut, but you got to go in there and look around. So when I look at the belief systems that are monotheistic in a hierarchical sense of an order that dictates both the here, the now, and the later, okay, you know what I'm talking about?
Well, somebody just said The Last Stand, the musical, so that was funny.
So I think that there is, and I've said this, and this happened it was probably right about after I officially adopted a Taoist philosophy and belief system very fundamentally. I'd learned Tai Chi, became an instructor and do Qigong, and have been very fascinated. Actually, in the mid 50s and mid 80s, pushing myself as far back as I can, when I met the mother of my two beautiful daughters, we were in class taking shiatsu certification.
Massage, right?
Well, shiatsu is Japanese for acupressure.
Okay, acupressure, gotcha.
Right, we didn't use needles. I'm a big needle baby, man. I see.
Well, you didn't use needles for that anyway.
I couldn't. I could never do the needle stuff back then. I missed out, I imagine, but So anyway, we were in shiatsu school and we had to learn traditional Chinese medicine, the meridians, acupressure, Swedish massage, and absolutely loved that. So that was my real first exposure to any of the Asian belief systems, and eventually into Ayurvedic out of India. But the Chinese, the Taoism, I also studied martial arts. I studied Jeet Kune Do. So there was all affinity. And I got to tell you,
that was Bruce Lee's system, right?
Yeah, that was his combined system of difference.
So you could school Roberts and you could school Stucci on the ancient tradition of urine therapy, couldn't you?
I could actually do that, and I think we might have to employ a Spock pinch in there somewhere. just for the hell of it, just because it'd be fun. So I think there was somewhere I was going with that, and I'm not sure where the hell it was, but there you go.
It was very interesting. We were talking about the Tao, and I mean, wouldn't it be funny? And I'm talking about all of us getting together, enlightened humans, getting together with the old gods that have been displaced, that aren't happy with this new God, and we all get together and we gather this big force and we go up and tell this God to move or get out, and all of a sudden we find there's just an empty chair, and we're looking around at each other like, well, maybe there isn't a God. It's just this Tao thing, man. We did all this for nothing.
Well, I think that there's so much more that is very fundamental, but it's one of these. It's when people start talking about, I don't care where you go, you pick the quantum side and science to the woo-woo side and throw some aliens and multidimensional beings in. I mean, there's a connection there that has a chasm between it, and boy, there's people filling all kinds of shit. It's like those people, like I said earlier, coming along, they pick up some scat, they wrap it up, throw it in the pile, or they throw it on the way to get people distracted. Because at the end of the day, when people start finding stuff, it's a threat to those who are trying to keep people from finding stuff.
It really is.
You know what I'm saying?
It is. That's a great point.
Because you get in when you find stuff that people don't want you to know about, like mental powers, like remote viewing, like any kind of psychokinesis.
Do you remote view, Robert?
I am a dabbler in the craft, and I'm trying to become. I'm an initiate at this point, but I'm trying to become an adept, because I find that the whole concept of being able to have non-locality of consciousness.
You want to know how I prostituted the hell out of that? And I feel bad about it now, but I didn't then. I'm thinking, I got these rods I use, and I wasn't really into the rods yet. So I started doing, I guess it was remote viewing. I would go into a little bit of a self-induced trance, and I would go into the future and pick all of the football scores versus the spread for the next Sunday. And I did it from about week 5 through the Super Bowl, like 78%, Robert. Now, is that remote viewing? Is that fortune telling? Is that time travel? Or is that just really, really lucky for an extended period of time?
It's all the above.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, there isn't any real specific well packaged and presented definition that I have found. So I think we're all, one of the great things about what's going on now is I think there's more empowerment and capability to formulate your own ideas and your own stuff without having to, accept somebody else's prepackaged, regurgitated cacophony of crap.
Mm-hmm. Is that a good thing or sometimes a bad thing? Everybody can make up their own stuff, start a YouTube channel, and all of a sudden it's codified. It's a thing now.
Well, I think it depends on if you need to look at it from two important aspects. From my perspective, is the way I see the energy in the cosmos. One, you have universal principles of the way that things function: the stars, the moons, the astrology, the biology, the chemistry, the physics. All of it has some type of order that we've at least been able to collectively codify and go, we all kind of see the same thing. Right. So there is, at least from a multi-dimensional perspective, at a minimum, there seems to be a shared dimension that most of us inhabit. Now, variances of that popping in and out on a multi-dimensional, a hyperdimensional plane or perspective, I think is fascinating and probably makes a lot of sense. And let me give give you an analogy. Go ahead.
Well, you mentioned Johnny Carson, right? You remember Karnak, right?
Awesome.
We have a caller, and we have a caller, and I think it's time to bring it in. I'm just gonna say the caller is, this caller had a top 40 single a few years ago and likes to swing on ladders through libraries. I think that, let's see if this is the caller. I think it is. And we're going to bring this caller in, and let's see if I'm right. Hello, caller. She's muted. You're live on the air, caller. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Rachel.
Do you like to swing on ladders through libraries?
I do. I was sitting over here just like fantasizing. I would just start singing. Oh, isn't this amazing? It's my favorite part because you'll see. Here's where she meets Prince Charming or Jeffrey Daugherty.
Ooh.
You won't discover that it's him till chapter 3. Anyway, that bookshelf is like a dream.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, Rachel Farris. Rachel, thanks for calling in.
Thank you, Rachel. That was beautiful.
Rachel, can I ask you a question while you're here?
Yes.
You also have a super duper hardcore Christian background, right?
Yes, I do.
And that led you from Orlando, Florida, out to I guess LA, and all of a sudden you've got a hit pop song. What the heck happened?
It's crazy. I was thinking about this the other day. Just every time I would get really far in my career, some producer, manager, record label head would hit on me and want more than the business relationship, and then I would have to start over from scratch. So now the Me Too movement is kind of wild to me, because I was like, well, that was normal for me. You just had to quit and say no and start over. So
so personal integrity was a thing back then, and now it's just it's not a thing so much anymore. Let's just make some money off of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I've started to kind of think about that. I was thinking there was a head of a record label too, and all this Me Too stuff reminded me of him, like pushing me down on the bed when I was just so young. And inviting me to these parties. I mean, if I told you the names of the producers and stuff like that, but in the end, all you have to do as an adult is say, no, if I'm going to make it, I will make it with my integrity, or it's not the business for me. So the Me Too movement right now is a little bit frustrating, because I feel like it's taking the place of the things that are more important, like the pedophilia things, where these children don't have a choice to say no. We women are adults. We can say, screw you, I'm out of here. But the children are like,
or not screw you, as it were.
Literally.
Yeah.
Not screw you, I'm out of here. But yeah, the little babies, these children, they have no clue. They can't just say no. So it's annoying to me that the Me Too movement gets all of this media, and the children are just the real victims in my book.
Excellent. Robert, do you have a question for Rachel?
No, I was actually going to say that I totally appreciate what you're experiencing, and I did the record thing, music studio stuff in the 70s. It wasn't until in the 90s when I had an opportunity to create my own label. And I had no intention of doing that. I actually built a studio so I could produce my own stuff. And the next thing you know, I'd just come out of my corporate career. I was all process modeled out with, ISO standards and doing everything by the book and mil spec. So I had a lot of process stuff that worked. Well, I built the studio. Next thing you know, I was producing everybody.
So you had a record label and you're producing artists.
Yes.
Wow.
And I'm paying for them all, because none of the artists have any money. They just they've got music, right? They know they've got songs, and I did some Native Americans. I did this phenomenal acoustic. It's all that intuitivesound.com is a label, and that's where the music is that we produced back then. But anyway, so I had a lot of, we did the Native American, we did spiritual stuff, we did world and Costa Rican. and the guys would come into the studio and they'd kind of sit there and they'd, they'd meditate, they'd burn sage, they'd, get into the groove and look for the spirit. And I gave them about an hour. And if there was no spirit movement in the live room, I was in there moving some spirit.
Absolutely. Wow. You became the spirit mover.
That's right. That's right.
God, that's so funny. That is so funny. And Rachel, you finally had to just say, no, this isn't for me. And Robert, you should go to Rachel. What's your website? RachelFarrisMusic.com?
Actually, it's just rachelsmusic.com.
Rachelsmusic.com. And you can see why her song "I'm Not the Girl" hit the top 40, and all of her stuff is super quality.
Awesome.
And Rachel, why? I know you a little bit. We've had some conversations, and I'm so glad you decided to call in tonight. But why did you make the choice to not be bitter and to get better? I mean, that's got to be crushing, because you've clearly got the talent, you've got the looks, you've got the skill, and it was taken away from you because you weren't willing to go to the casting couch. How do you keep from getting bitter, and how have you turned that to a place where you've actually gotten better in your life?
That is a great question. At the time, I really yielded it over to God, who God was in my life then. And I thought, you know what? I must be here for a different purpose, or it's not the right time. But I felt deeply that there was just no option for me, that if that was the only way, and I still wonder if that's the only way to make it in the industry. If it is, then I decided it's not for me. And I've always felt like an eternal soul, whether that came from, it started as the Christian roots of eternal life, but now it's changed with consciousness and just realizing, wow, I'm a spiritual being inside this body. And that's what mattered to me always. And it's just, I can't really explain it other than that. I just knew there was more than this life, and that was more important, that I kept my spirit and my soul intact. Thank God.
Wow.
Yeah.
Rachel, let me ask you
awesome.
one question, if you would. And then Robert, would you answer this question after Rachel does? Because I don't know as much about singing as you do. John Cox in the chat room says, how much energy would 40,000 people singing the same song put out? Rachel, speak to that, if you would.
Oh my goodness. That is the most beautiful thing, when music has so much power, and there's so much that I don't know about the mechanics and there's so much history about, even with the pyramids, there's something to do with the notes and the music and the things vibrating off of the walls and where you place them, and so much I'd love to learn. But even just a choir itself alone, and when you think about thousands of voices together singing in a choir, you literally go to another dimension when you're in that choir. And I think that gave me the beginning of realizing just how much music changes lives and touches people. And that was always my goal, is that with music, you actually can raise people's vibration. And so I think that's the powerful thing that I still would love to do somehow, some way, if that is, still part of my mission on this planet right now. But I still remember, just people coming up to me after concerts and saying, you know what, my dad just died, or, I just brutally lost this person or that person, and listening to your album got me through the hardest time. And, it's music, and all of the power in it is healing, and it's scientific.
That's amazing. Professor, from a more technical point of view, what would you say?
I was actually going to go for the kind of a blend between the technical and the spiritual.
Please do.
Because what she's talking about in my experience and expression is that there is a cosmological language of the way in which everything manifests, right? So all of the stuff we see is a manifestation of the energy that consciousness focuses on, and it materializes, it manifests. Okay, this is my view, that those frequencies in music in particular, because of the resonance and harmony and disharmony within frequencies is where music expresses itself and has the most profound effect on the biological and the psychological side of our human expression and experience. That's why movie soundtracks have these incredible swells and dynamics, and it's not just in the harmonies, it's in the tempos and the rhythms, and you can construct, literally concoct, frequency imprints from sound that will biologically and physiologically change whatever that target is. That's how not only profound the experience is, but it's a language. It is the language of the cosmos that shows you where these harmony sections and disharmony sections are, and it permeates everything. So why do you feel really cool? You feel sad about a minor song versus feeling happy on a major key. When I did those tracks for Rocky, I was thinking, how do I feel when I think about the situation room? And that's what it came out. And then on the second piece, it was like, okay, he needs to chill out and come back because he always gets worked up in the first segment. So I gave it that kind of feel for the second piece, an intentional sonic vibration that I was creating for that moment. That is alchemy in sound.
It is.
I think that is the intention of being able to be aware of, and to find frequencies of different things that you resonate with is the most, for me, it's this ride of like, I think I'm always high when I'm out there feeling and looking around for this vibration that I resonate with. And you don't always find it, but when you do, that's why you were tying it back to, this whole crap of the way that it's so agitated and all this doom and gloom and everything. Everybody's focusing that frequency over there, and they're trying to drive as many people. They're, creating, they're knitting and doing the weaving of the fabric of the social discourse and putting colors and different materials, and some of it's steel right up next to cotton and some satin. And then it's, somebody comes in and puts a rope in there with nylon, and you're like, dude, you back up. You're putting too much shit in for the wrong reasons, and you're making a mess out of the stuff. But what do? They continue on, and then they have this big net, and then they throw it over a bunch of people's heads, and they try to snag them in.
Oh, they really do. They really do. Rachel, please, one more time, tell us what your website is.
Absolutely. It's rachelsmusic.com, just RACHELSMUSIC. And I had one little thing I wanted to add to what Robert just said.
Okay, I'll make a deal with you.
Okay.
You can add this one little thing that you wanted to add to what Robert says if, before you leave, you do a little more of that bell song on the way out.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think that's a deal.
All right. So you go for it. We got 3 minutes left. They're all yours.
Oh, you're so sweet. Okay. Well, I just love what you were saying, Robert, because the power of the music that you were just talking about translates into the fact that it can be used to manipulate the masses, control the masses. Even the pop industry, it's down to a science. They know how to program people's minds with the certain, the way that they do it. And I'm not an expert on that. I just write from my heart and soul. And so I think it has a positive impact. But there are ways to manipulate and turn everything into something negative and controlling people or implanting things in their minds. And so I think that's where we have the responsibility to counter that and just use it for good, just like everything.
You are absolutely spot on. And if more people thought like you, there'd be a lot less of this BS that we're all kind of having to deal with. It's coming from too many angles. But you're absolutely right, Rachel. If you focus on trying to find the cool frequencies and resonances, then you got less time for the stuff that's just a pain in the ass. And you've got more time for beautiful voices like yours.
That's so true. Rachel, please, if you would, some great high frequency resonance as we say goodbye to Rachel Farris. And after she finishes singing a little bit, we'll wrap up the show with Robert Bauer, our new guest host. Thank you, Rachel, so much. And please, you have the floor.
Thank you, guys. Oh, wasn't this amazing? It's my favorite part because you'll see. Here's where she meets Prince Charming, but she won't discover that it's him till the end of the world. Just kidding. It's not happening, guys.
Sounded great.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rachel Farris. Let's give her a round of virtual applause. Thank you so much, Rachel. Really, really appreciate you being here. And I'm trying to figure out how to let you go. Well, you can go, but I'm just trying to let you go from here. All right. I think that's sufficient right there. Well, Professor, that's the first editions in the books. And I think Rachel came in and saved us. We were dying up here.
Thank God for Rachel, man. That was perfect timing. You're a goddess. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure to have you, and I'm looking forward to more of it.
You know what? You talking to me?
I'm talking to you, Robert
me?
Bauer.
Well, yeah, it has been a pleasure, and I've enjoyed the hell out of it. If we can pull one off once in a while and sit here and go, yeah, that wasn't too bad, and then we're doing better than most.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure. Robert. I'll get in touch with you over the next day or so. We'll strategize for next week, and I really do appreciate you. I know you're a very busy guy. You really don't have time to be here doing this, and I appreciate you being here. And I've been watching the chat room, and nothing but rave reviews. People are very, very happy, very, very excited that you're here. We had a tremendous live crowd here, and I'm very, very honored and privileged to have the professor, Robert Bauer, as my co-host on The Last Stand.
Thank you, Brother Jeff. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. I hope I could contribute something to the conversation. And I tell you what, this is kind of fun. We should probably do more of it.
Absolutely. Let's do it. So, folks, next time, same place, same time, we'll be doing it. And let's be honest, whether Robert's here or I'm here, the most important people are the, over 400 of you that are here live and the many thousands that'll watch this over the coming days. And I really do think we're the last generation of real humans. And it's things like this that will help us get busy. And Robert, they say that it's winners that write the history. With people like this, people like Rachel, people like you, I feel like today we can win, and together we can write a better tomorrow.
Amen to that. Amen. Let's do it.
All righty. For Robert Bauer, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you again next week. Until then, as Robert Stanley says, be courageous, be kind, be caring, and be out there in the midst of people, changing people's lives. We appreciate you. For Robert Bauer, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. We'll see you again next week.